Are we recording? Is this thing on?
Yes, it is. Welcome to RevOps 500, where we invite the world's top marketers to answer the tough questions facing growing organizations.
Ooh, sounds important.
I'm Sajeel Qureshi.
And I'm Gil Pei. Join us as we dive deep into the world of RevOps.
We'll be learning strategies and expertise from first-hand experience. RevOps 500 is sponsored by Computan. They provide technical and development expertise to growth-focused marketing.
Let's get started.
Hey everybody, Sajeel Qureshi here with another episode of RevOps 500, where we interview some of the world's greatest and latest marketing and RevOps gurus. Today, I am extremely excited and a little bit honored to be talking to a human-centered marketer with 20 plus years of marketing experience. She's a leader. She's got expertise in enterprise. She's an ABM expert, and she knows content marketing extremely well. She has a strong background in different kinds of businesses like Microsoft and Expedia, other large tech providers as well. She's a thought leader. And on top of all that, she's a very talented independent musician. Samara Donald, welcome to RevOps 500.
Thanks so much, Sajeel. Great to be here.
All right, so Samara, let's get right into it. What is one RevOps myth that you can share with our listeners?
I would say the biggest myth I've come across over my experience is that RevOps is a tool or a system or a combination of both, and that it really is a technology more than it is about the people and the process.
So the people in the process. So like, what do you mean by exactly the people in the process? Is it like, can you unpack that a little bit for us, or?
Sure. I mean, it's my general philosophy about, I'll just say, corporate enterprise and the way work gets done, as much as it is just in general about technology, that really it's the people who are using the technology, the platforms, et cetera, and or building the processes where things kind of make or break, either slow it down or speed it up. That clearly technology is simply technology and can be very powerful, but until put in the hands of the right group of people with the right attitudes, the right behavior, the right objectives, it would be useless.
So it's almost like you're saying that that the that the technology takes on the life of the people who are using it in a way.
For sure. I mean, I definitely have, again, just a general philosophy that technology is obviously built by people, and those people will influence the technology, and therefore the technology is a reflection of the people. This is especially true in AI. I did a lot of studies on gender and kind of how gender can influence what actually is coming out in technology as just one factor of the humans that are going into coding the technology, but also then it really, I think the larger part is about how the people and the processes are built around that technology are, for me, far more important than technology. This is just to say, I think oftentimes we'll go into, let's say, building something like, let's build a RevOps team. We'll say the tool is going to solve everything. The tool will not solve everything. The tool is just a tool, and it will need to be used by people and processes, and those need to be developed alongside the technology, and probably just that, developed alongside, as opposed to maybe an afterthought, or not even a thought.
So when you talk about develop, I mean, it sounds like you have to develop the people like that. That you mean like the training, the knowledge, understanding how to use it, because you get what you put in with the technology, right?
Yes, I'll talk a little bit more about it. I also, foundationally believe that first and foremost, understanding how the organization is organized and then operates. So what's the organizing model? Who does what? How is the org structured? As much as the operating model then between those teams of people, for example. So really thinking through, what are we solving for, both from a what does this tool need to do? What does the data need to show us? What are the reports it needs to give us? What's the insights we want from it? But who is actually going to be using that tool? How will they use it within their organization? Do we have competing needs? Do we have shared goals? Do we have clear lines of ownership, authority, R&R between teams? And oh, by the way, how do those teams communicate? What are the mechanisms that those teams work together, and using that kind of vantage point to really think through what a tool or a process is really trying to solve. Because I think if we go into, exercises of let's build a tool, we're often looking at what do we want to get from this tool versus looking at what are really the underlying problems we may have in the organization functionally, again, with regard to the people that we need to solve for, that we may not be able to even articulate, but that are there if we take a deeper look at the organizing structure and the operating models within the organization.
So I mean, that's a lot to think about. That's a lot to a lot to process, a lot to think about. How do you prevent like something like analysis paralysis from happening when you think about
Yeah.
all those moving pieces? I mean, how do you get around that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it can be. Look at organizing models, for example, you get to organizational design and there will never be a perfect solution to organize a complex company. Companies these
Right.
days are particularly large enterprises. There's never the right answer. It's just what is the answer that we are going to choose to organize ourselves against. And
Okay.
I think that's important to bear in mind is we're making a choice. All kind of org structures, operating models, or all strategies are simply choices. There's no right answer. It's really about, I think, everyone being on the same page and understanding how the organization actually works. It's quite interesting. I was listening to one of your episodes just yesterday, and there was a guest on your show talking about, it's really important that, let's say for new employees, people joining the team, that everybody has a shared understanding of how we make money as a first step. And I think that is so true. I think too often we bring new people into the organization and people just don't really get to that fundamental question of how do we make money? What is our revenue, pathway? Or what's our business model, right? And that becoming the kind of foundational understanding. I would say it's equally important to have everybody on the same page and understand how our company operates from, again, the human side of things, how our teams are organized, why we organize this way, why we've chosen to organize this way. And then again, how fundamentally work gets done across these teams. Ultimately, that's what a company is humans coming together to do things that then produce, in a corporate environment, it produces revenue. And you get to that fundamental question. So for me, I always take that step backwards and say, before I get to how we make money and what our business model is, but how are we actually organized and which teams do what? Are we a traditional structure with engineering and product development and then marketing and then sales, or are we a totally different type of organization where we've got something as progressive as RevOps and DevOps that bring those teams together, et cetera?
It sounds so simple when you say so. I mean, like, this sounds so much simple. It sounds very simple, but at the same time, it's so much more complicated than that, isn't it? I mean, like,
Well, it's Occam's razor, right? And sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. It's almost backing up and saying, okay, is everybody on the same page with, I think these things are assumed sometimes that everybody understands how we make money, everybody understands how we're organized. And my personal passion is really around, organizational design, development, sociology, et cetera. And I've come to learn that's a slightly unusual vantage point. And I use that often when I have conversations with people who are like, gosh, I'm really struggling to get this done, or I'm really struggling to have sales understand what it is we're really doing here in marketing, and kind of say, well, let's back up. Let's talk about how sales is organized. Let's talk about the fundamentals of what sales is motivated by. Are we motivated by the same things? Do we have shared goals fundamentally? And really backing up. And that's why I talk about being human centered. Is I really try to look at that side of things, which is really just to say, it's about how people operate together, more so than it is about, any one individual and where they're coming from.
okay, so let's talk a little bit less about people and more about robots.
Sure.
What is not robots, but technology? So what keeps you up at night technically right now in like a RevOps technology stack engine and that kind of thing? Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I think what keeps me up, certainly these days, and just, this has been the case in the last, I'd say, 5 years, everything has seemed to have become so complex. It is really how do we keep up with the complexity, not just of, the marketplace at large, but of customers and how fast they're changing, their needs are changing, how fast our companies and organizations are changing. With the pandemic, nobody could have ever expected the myriad changes that required, certainly for marketing. I think we saw things very, very rapidly change, into the virtual world and how we connect with customers. Certainly for sales, that was the case. So how can our technology, keep up with all these changes that are happening so rapidly, and even beyond the pandemic? Just take today's buzzword of Gen AI and buzz, I guess you call it buzz technology. Now it's a whole question of how do we get our systems thinking for themselves and doing things that automate all of our lives so that we can move on to bigger, greater things. And that, I think, just it's both keeps me up at night from a how do we keep our technology and our people and our processes up to speed, but also how do I personally keep up to speed? As one has crossed the 20-year mark in the world of technology, it becomes harder and harder to just keep track of everything. So that is definitely, I think, top of mind for me. And I wouldn't say I have any strong tips or solutions to how to solve for that, with exception of relentlessly prioritizing everything that, all of this complexity, and really what is, rising to the top of the sort of pile of things that need to sort of keep up with, and where can I have the largest, greatest influence, and what other things can I perhaps, delegate downward, or, essentially work with another team to put on their priority list, etc.
Okay, so when it comes to, like, you mentioned keeping yourself up to speed, and then obviously, the technology itself is constantly changing. It's very, very complex. When things get so very, very complex, it seems like every discipline, I mean, not just marketing, I mean, every discipline is very, very scientific now. I mean, marketing is not just, you can't just have one person as a marketing who just knows everything. I mean, there's web developers, there's SEO people, there's design, there's content, there's copy, there's video. Experts are niche now, right? So how does a generalist live in a niche-driven world, I guess? What is the key? How does that happen?
I mean, for me, I really think you're absolutely right. That is the key question. As a generalist, and I think that's just what happens over the course of one's career. You become more general because
Of course.
go to management or what have you. And I think I heard Bill Gates once say, like, his main success comes from choosing the right people to have on his team. And that's what I rely on as well. I really hold a high bar, in terms of hiring, and I'll look for specific, experts in an area, particularly where I have a gap. So, I'm not a, data analyst. I'm not a business analyst, but I will therefore need to fill my gaps with experts into the team. And, also looking for, to build that team that fills each other's gaps. And if I can't source it on my team, if I don't have, the resourcing, then it's where can I borrow from in another part of the organization, seek out people who have that expertise, who may have a tool or a system, and it's 80% of what we need. Great. Let's leverage that, as opposed to maybe building something new. I think there's definitely this, in the technology sector, we're all kind of, builders. And so it's a constant, shiny new thing. And we want to build things. We want to develop cool things that solve this problem very specifically. But really, I think one can move faster by looking to maybe take, if it's 80% solves my problem and it goes twice as fast, that may be the right, trade-off. By borrowing maybe another system that kind of fills the need of where we're seeing a gap.
So, you talk about having the gaps that we have or filled with other people, and on in a team, say if you're good at one thing, fill in the gaps with people who are good at other things that maybe you're not as strong in, or something like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we talked about the past a little bit. Now let's talk about the future of marketing, RevOps, these sorts of things. Do you think that's going to change at all? How do you feel like that mentality will stay the same? Will differ? What is your opinion?
No, I'm super excited about, just the idea for RevOps. And in many companies, it's still just an idea. In many companies, we still have these silos, right, of marketing operations, sales operations, services operations. We're all using different tools. They don't talk to each other. You can't even see into, marketing doesn't see into sales doesn't see into marketing. And that feels so antiquated when you actually look at this sort of discipline of RevOps. And I see DevOps as kind of the parallel to that on the engineering side, right? You have separations of engineering, product, et cetera, teams, and DevOps has kind of been able to tie that, to try to tie that knot together. For me, I don't know how we could do it any other way than by looking at sales marketing services, all in one view and vantage point. At the end of the day, I think we see marketers who are in the world of siloed operations, tools, technology. I'm going to include in that as the crux of very large strategic implications, meaning we literally have different goals and different measures between sales and marketing. And if that's the case, not we, I'm just saying hypothetically, if there are different systems, different tools and processes, we may be in a situation where we have completely different lenses on what are we trying to achieve, which just fundamentally doesn't seem like the recipe for success. So what I love about just the level, say philosophically RevOps, and then depending on how that looks in your company, because it can look very different company to company, the fundamental philosophy of bringing sales marketing services together under one mechanism, potentially one tool set, potentially one set of processes, definitely one set of goals, definitely one set of core metrics, with maybe some variations based on, teams, I would say feels definitely to me the future and not something that will kind of slip away in the wind.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of RevOps 500. This podcast is a great opportunity and channel for revenue operations and much more. If you've been thinking about a podcast or you want to ship production to a friendly team, check out ringmaster.com. They're the team behind this podcast. RevOps 500 is sponsored by Computan. Computan serves as the back-end dev and technology team for shorthanded marketing agencies and departments. Shorthanded? Wait a minute, that sounds like me. Now, let's get back to it. The end.
It's a very detailed. It's very detailed what you're thinking, but it is very, very simple. It's very, very black and white, very arbitrary. Kind of looking at what's happened in the past, what's happening in other industries, and applying it in a RevOps context, which is probably, if you're hedging your bets, is probably how it's going to shake out.
I think so. And I think the more we begin to, I'll say, build some more templatized or maybe slightly more, I don't want to say rigid, but just more, a blueprint for what does successful RevOps look like? Like, I feel RevOps is really in its infancy. I only experienced it in my experience in startup. And I think startup has the ability to kind of really start with that foundation of RevOps versus, I'd say, enterprises who've been in existence for 50 plus years, 25 plus years. It's harder because you're talking about bringing together what is today in silos into something new, which then again requires change management, behavior change, potentially identity change, which is a whole other problem. Versus, if you're in a startup, you're able, and you start with that philosophy. Someone's kind of come in on the operations side and said, let's not start marketing ops, sales ops, services ops. Let's actually do this all together. Notwithstanding, I think there will always be a time and a place in it and a place in a space for something like marketing ops and sales ops uniquely, in addition to the sort of more centralized RevOps, but it's sort of more like a spoke of a wheel versus what is in existence, I think, in some legacy enterprises, which is the siloed, and there's nothing tying everything together.
Yeah, and it's again poignant and probably accurate. So look, I just it's probably true, right? So okay, so Samara, the first half of the episode, and we learned a lot from you. Now let's try to learn a little bit more about you. Okay, so how did you get here? What's the story? Were you always built this way? What happened?
No, I wasn't always built this way, for sure. No, my childhood was on the stage, and as you mentioned, I kind of come back to some hobby music making. I went to university for music. I thought I was going to be an opera singer, and decided I didn't really want to do that. And so started exploring, as you do in college, what are some other things I could kind of do with my life? And was really attracted to communications and media in particular. kind of the like media buying side, which is a lot about spreadsheets and looking at numbers and CPLs, et cetera. And I had this wonderful professor in university who said, what are you going to do after college? I was like, I don't know. And he says, I have this friend. She works at Microsoft. She wants some raw talent. I said, Microsoft? Like those people who make my computer? I don't know what that is. And that was literally me at, 18 and flash forward. I've had some fantastic opportunities and experience to really play roles in all the sides of what one mentor once called the four wheels of the go-to-market car. Sales, marketing, services, and partner was what she could have framed as the four wheels of a car that ultimately, have the engine of the product and solutions that we're offering, and obviously all the other parts, HR and finance, what have you. But you can see where I got an early learning about how all these teams work together to drive a car, and my ultimate passion for really understanding fundamentally how the wheels work together to drive the car. So some fantastic experiences. I worked in customer support for some time. I had the pleasure of working for a vice president of emerging markets, and looking at emerging markets from the context of, talk about so far away from RevOps and emerging markets. Although, we could use, data to kind of tell us where are the markets that we want to, pay attention to, et cetera. Especially if that data is coming from one place. So data in and of itself, I think, has always been a fundamental side of all the roles that I played. I think that's probably not uncommon in just today's world. Data is playing a major part of our lives, no matter what career we're in. I've always considered myself a marketer, despite working in sales and services or field partner marketing. Always been kind of a marketer at heart, and I don't know. It's an interesting one. I've been really questioning why that identity. Why is my identity so bonded to marketing? But I don't have an answer for that. But nonetheless, it is. So that's kind of been my career experience. I've been able to obviously work for large technology companies, startups, agency side for a while, as you mentioned, doing really some deep work in ABM. And executive marketing, really thinking about, once again, the human side of things, in an enterprise technology decision, all of those players at the table, and how do we think about their mindset and their attitudes toward technology, their attitudes toward each other, their identity. Huge in the executive space, for example. Recently we had, maybe 5 years ago, that sort of hot topic was CIOs and CDOs, and whether that role would merge to a CDIO. And, again, you get really into sort of psychology about identity, and the CIO will resist this change. The CDO comes in, that's a sign that something's changing. Really quite interesting, again, marriage of, these more people-centric things of, okay, we know that a CDO coming into a company is a signal of some major change and potential open door for technology. Now, can our data tell us when that's happening? Can we get a signal back from, this, a data source that tells us, proactively pushes us to say, ping, new CDO has been, detected at XYZ company. So that's where I kind of go, I marry these two sides of my brain, at least, at the sort of passion around and understanding people and their role within a company. And then how do we use data and technology to really help us either identify that, know that, measure that, et cetera.
Okay, so Samara, I have to ask. We talked about the top of the episode. Tell us a little bit about the background of music. I mean, you studied opera, and just take us through that a little bit. Tell the listeners about that if you can. Please.
Yes. Happy to. We could have a whole podcast on music, and the relationship between music and music and math, and music and marketing. So it's so interesting. I think these things are, when you're building a career, when you're in your career, when you're in your life, raising kids, raising families, and trying to do a career, you don't have a lot of time for hobbies. So I had gone away from doing music even as a hobby for some years, but during COVID, I I didn't have anything to do with my evening. So I couldn't visit with family and friends. So it was, I've always wanted to learn guitar. And I've always sung on, whether that's, on a stage or at church or whatever. But it was, it's, if you're just a singer, I shouldn't say, if you're a singer, often you need the accompaniment. And so I've always thought, I'd love to learn guitar, play a little piano as a kid, but nothing I could like accompany myself. So I thought, let me try this. Let me see if I can, learn enough so that I can at least accompany myself around a campfire, type of thing. And that was now 3 years ago, which just, I set off that kind of challenge to myself, set off a whole other side of my life now. And I think just my natural state of being curious about things and always wanted to learn something new. And I get very deep into not just figuring something out, but really becoming an expert at something. It's sort of just how my brain works. And so that let's learn a simple song to accompany myself on guitar. And then I started playing for friends and, virtually. And then I was like, I probably could figure out how to like publish this, on some platform. And that became, and then how do I produce it professionally? How do I maybe hire other musicians to sort of do the drums and do the bass, et cetera. And, flash forward to today, I have produced, I think, upwards of 30 songs now, under 2 different brands on Spotify, and all the other platforms as well. I really feel like I have a handle on how to do that, meaning how to get your music distributed, how to market your music, how to, build the brand. It's been just fun and a joy and a pleasure to really understand both sides of it, creating music for today's world of publishing music, which is very different than how it used to be. And this is where I think my technology world and my passion for music have really married, because I couldn't have done this 20 years ago. There was not the technology platforms. There were not the businesses that are now set up to help you, an independent single one woman band, literally, to get, music into a sound and a quality and a place that you could publish it yourself. So I know a publishing entity. I understand how sync licensing works. I understand nobody makes any money at music anymore. It is fine, except Taylor Swift. But
Yeah.
it is a passion of mine. I particularly love songwriting. So that's really, it's just even, extended beyond now the singing, and I'm writing pretty much all of my own singing, writing, producing. I've gotten into now even the engineering, which is the sort of mixing and mastering, which I think nobody does on their own. And now you really know me as a person. I just sort of crave learning new things, and music was a space that I just really wanted to understand more and do more. And so I've taken myself to that sort of what we call self-reliant. I can do all these things and get some music sort of out there, honestly, just for the pleasure of doing it.
It's amazing. I mean, like, and it kind of ties back into your initially what you talked about, right? How it's the people versus the technology, right? So, I mean, I have a tabla behind me here. I have a ukulele behind me here, but I mean, this just technology for me until I actually would go and, apply things to it, right? So same thing. Is it the same sort of thing with music as it is in RevOps, like as the bit you started with, similar
I,
idea?
I absolutely think so. I mean, yeah, certainly on the lens of, it takes a person with enough motivation and passion and drive and grit to figure these things out. I mean, I think like I said, there's few, let's say, independent artists who are literally doing everything all the way to the mixing, mastering, publishing, distributing, marketing, all that. That's a unique beast. But I talk a lot I have an agent now working on licensing the music, and they have said, you are a very unique person because you actually get your stuff done. And when I give you a spreadsheet to fill out, that's like 42, cells long of you need this light, you need this code and that code. And I mean, it's can be very complicated from a business standpoint, but the person who's going to do that and do the work to get it done, obviously has a passion. So certainly, I think that comes back to, again, just there are 100 ideas a day that we have in business of how we're going to make things better, how things are broken. And we can sit there all day and complain about them, or we can actually figure out how to make them happen. And maybe one idea out of 100 actually gets to fruition in the point that we've now built something, a mechanism, a tool, a process, a team, a workforce, a task force. And, obviously those are the people who kind of stand out, certainly who are able to get from an idea all the way to executing. And now we have something that's like a working tool, model, system, whatever the thing is.
Samara, where can people get a hold of you and learn more about you? I'm sure they'll want to.
Absolutely. So LinkedIn, if it's about work and career and ops and all the fun stuff about lead flow, lead generation, etc. LinkedIn, Samara J. Donald. And then on the music side, my brands are Mara Soul, which is MARASOL. And then my secondary brand is called Oriel, which is more of an electronic brand. So all the me's. My husband says sometimes it's like living with 3 different people, depending on which personality I take on. But you got to keep it fun, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, with 3 different identities, fun is definitely part of it, right?
Absolutely.
Well, listen, Samara, it's been enlightening talking to you. I mean, just learning about how you tie people with technology. I mean, then we brought into like the different the future of where this is going and how it might stay the same, and kind of proved it with some of your own data from the past. Then we talked about obviously the music is a huge part of your life, and how it's kind of how we can even tie learning music and the grit and require with that to back into like a marketing strategy, putting it together, learning new technology, places, people, how it's all going to make sense at the end of it. So thank you very much for coming on and jamming with me about this today.
Absolutely. Anytime you want to jam, I'm here. I think we'll bring your mandolin in next time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so if anybody is listening at home, if you learned something today, or you had fun laughing with Samara and I, just tell somebody about the podcast if you'd like to. And Samara, again, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Sajeel.
This has been another exciting episode of RevOps 500, and we'll see you all next time. And that wraps up another episode of RevOps 500. Thanks for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at RevOps500.com. RevOps 500 is sponsored by CompuTech, providing technical and development expertise to growth-focused marketing teams.